Today is Wednesday, April 21st. We're on the Miracles of Jesus Christ, part 22. Dear Diary, we begin a new day in Jerusalem with a free day. Now, this was not an organized tour on this day with any of the Bennies. The Lord knew we needed a break from all the madness for sure. So Benny told us the day before that we needed to make arrangements to find taxis. He told us how to go about it. He told us how to find bus schedules. He said we could simply walk to Old Jerusalem to the market if we like. For Natalie and Mom and I, that's not an option. Mom can't walk that far. Last night, before we all went to our rooms, we made our plans. I found a taxi service. We figured out how much it was going to cost. And then Benny also told us before he left that day, he was very strict about this. He said, don't you dare pay full price for anything in the stalls. He said, you barter. He said, if I find out you paid full price, I'm going to be very angry. His words, not mine. So I take him seriously, and that's not easy for me. I've never bartered for anything in my life. It's just not in me. When somebody charges a price at a yard sale, if I like it, I buy it. If I don't, I simply pass on. I never offer less than what someone's asking for something. So this is against my entire nature. Now there's a fellow that's going to stay with Mom and Natalie and I, Mike, and I've known Mike for years. I said to him, I guess we can figure out shekels to dollars and barter without too much problem. Now Mike is just as backward as I am when it comes to bartering. He doesn't want to try to barter. He says, I'll feel like a jerk, but he wants to buy a shofar. And his wife told him, who didn't come with, she stayed back in the States. She said, Michael, get yourself a shofar. He's a musician, and he's a very talented musician. They're expensive. A shofar is the twisted horn that they use to call. You've seen it in movies. And so we sat down the night before we went for our free day, and I said to Mike, well, look, let's do this. Let me pretend to be your wife. And when you go to pick one up, I'm going to be a naggy wife. I'm going to say, honey, that's just too much. I don't think you should spend that much. And I said, that way you don't feel like a schmuck. I don't feel like a schmuck. And we'll see if we can't get you a shofar without too many hassles, because we don't want to make Benny mad. And it worked like a charm. We walked the open market for several hours. We took our time. But even so, my mother was just getting too tired. So finally, we decided to start moving back towards the Radisson and to get something to eat for a late lunch. It seems a little uncomfortable for us to pick out our own eating place. We are in another country. Americans stand out like a sore thumb. We just stand out like a sore thumb wherever we go. But we found a little sandwich shop. We ordered some food. It gave my mother a chance to rest, and then we navigated, or rather I did, and navigated a car or slash a taxi for us to get back to the Radisson. Mike stayed with Natalie, Mom and me for the rest of the day, and then went back to the hotel with us. We got back, Mom gets a shower, she gets some rest, and then we headed to dinner in the dining room. When we were done with dinner in the dining room, they have a very large entry. When you first walk into this hotel, it's like a place for people to sit, just look around. It's unlike any of the hotels in our country. I can't think of a hotel in our country when you walk in the main entrance where there's this huge area with multiple chairs and tables and a grand piano, and people just sit and watch people come and go. If you can think of one, feel free to tag it here. But that's what we were doing, and they had this beautiful grand piano. And at some point, the pastor from the church saw us sitting there, and he came down and he said, Mom, would you play? He always called my mom when we were on this trip. So she sat there and she played the grand piano for the longest time, and people were stopping. My mother was gifted. This was her gift from God. Everybody was telling us, oh my word, your mom's talented. She was perhaps one of the most talented pianists I've known in my lifetime. My mother was a tiny woman. She was maybe 4'10". Mom was very shy. She was very backward in her manner. She was not much for speaking to strangers. And when there were times in Israel when she would get really mad at me, because I'm like my dad, I can talk to a rock. And it would irritate my mother because I reminded her too much of my dad sometimes. But when this little woman sat down at the piano and ran up and down those black and white keys, she looked and sounded like a professional concert pianist. Her talent was a God-given gift, and she sat straighter. I don't know how to explain it. Her shoulders were back. She held herself like a diva when she was using the gift God gave her. It was a good night, and it was and is a great memory for me. Jesus cures a woman who has been afflicted for 18 years, found in Luke chapter 13. On a Sabbath, Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues. A woman was there who had been crippled by a spirit for 18 years. She was bent over and could not straighten up at all. When Jesus saw her, he called her forward and said, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." Then he put his hands on her, and immediately she straightened up and praised God. Indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, the synagogue leader said to the people, "There are 6 days for work, so come and be healed on those days, not the Sabbath." And the Lord answered him, "You hypocrite. Don't each of you on the Sabbath untie your ox or donkey from the stall and lead it out to give it water? Then should not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, who Satan has bound for 18 long years, be set free on the Sabbath day from what has bound her?" When he said this, all his opponents were humiliated, but the people were delighted with all the wonderful things he was doing. Now, the leaders of the church are already plotting to have Jesus killed, so you understand the backstory. Well, they didn't want to hear his teachings. His teachings pricked their dirty little hearts, but by the same token, they could pick at him constantly, try to denigrate him. And Jesus blasts them out for it. He calls them hypocrites. Nobody needs to translate that word from the original Hebrew or Greek. A hypocrite is a hypocrite. It's a two-faced person who would stick a knife in someone's back even while doing the evil they're blaming that person of. And that's what Jesus calls them out on. And then he delivers them the truth. I suppose nowadays someone might be offended because Jesus is equating this woman under bondage to a donkey or an ox being tied to a stall. It makes me laugh. Every time I read this passage, Jesus had such a wonderful, biting sense of direct truth humor. He doesn't play. These are fighting words. The woman in the story, it says, was under demonic bondage. Now, we don't know how or why, but her physical bondage was demonic in nature. And yet she was in church. She was, according to Christ's own words, a daughter of Abraham. Again, the religious leaders often made pious comments about being sons of Abraham. Jesus actually holds their feet to the fire, and he says to them at one point, "If you were really Abraham's sons, then you would listen to me with gladness. You are not the sons of Abraham." But in this context, he's telling this poor woman, who the religious leaders probably wouldn't even bother to give the light of day to, a true daughter of Abraham. With this statement, Jesus is lifting this woman up emotionally and mentally. With his healing, he lifts her up physically. What a day for this gal. She goes to church, bent over at the waist, treated like a lower class person, and then meets the Lord of all and has her body completely healed. What a day. According to the studies I found, all say the same. This is definitely demonic in nature. She was fused. For whatever reason, she was unable to move her bones at any point. She was constantly looking at a dirty floor, dusty floor, somebody's feet. What an awful way to live for 18 years. So let's look at this in real time. I'm going to do this in story form. Jesus teaches in the synagogue when he sees, from his vantage point in the front, this poor soul. She's bent over completely in half. She's standing with the other women in the back of the synagogue. It's where the women always stood. Jesus calls her forward. The crowd begins to part to allow her to pass. The women help her along. They're so excited. The master has taken notice of her. Some use a soft hand. Others push a little harder. Hurry, hurry. And then Jesus himself, as she gets to him, turns. And he looks at her. And he says, "Woman, you are loosed from your sickness." And boom, up she flies, praising God even as she flies forward, her body shooting like a rocket. Now, do you imagine her joy? Oh, my word. Look at the wording Jesus used in the miracle, too. He says, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." Now, the original translation of this is a word, apolyo, A-P-O-L-Y-O. It is a common word. It's used several ways in the New Testament. If it's a legal term, it's used in the legal way to say grant acquittal, set free, release, and pardon. Isn't that cool? If it's used in other terms, it means in a painful condition, it means to be set free, let go, send away, and dismiss. It's also the word used for, you ready for this one? Divorce. Here, Jesus uses it in the perfect tense. So it means that it took place in the past, but it continues effective immediately. So basically, Jesus is saying to her these words, woman, you were and are set free from your infirmity. In other words, that demon is gone. Whatever that demonic entity was, it's gone. There's no worry that this is going to happen again. She was free indeed. Was the woman sinful that this happened? It doesn't say that. He doesn't say your sins are forgiven you like he did with the man we spoke of the other day. It's possible that this woman had a demon attach itself to her body. It was comfortable there, and it created a physical pain. That's what some of the scholars have said that I've read. So she started to lean forward early in the years to help release some of this demonic going on in her back. And she would keep leaning for freedom from the pain until she leaned forward so often and so much that she created a fusion in her own body. John 8:31-41 is an entirely different story here, but it helps us understand the backstory. So I'm going to read the entire exchange of John 8:31-41, and I'm going to read it to you from the New Living Translation so you can understand what exactly is happening here, not between Jesus and the woman now, but Jesus and the religious leaders. There's two things going on here. First, that the woman is freed, and secondly, that Jesus is proving a vital point to these men. Here we go. Quote, you are truly my disciples if you remain faithful in my teachings, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. But we are descendants of Abraham, the religious leader said. We've never been slaves to anyone. What do you mean we will be set free? Jesus replied, I tell you the truth. Everyone who sins is a slave of sin. A slave is not a permanent member of the family, but a son is part of the family forever. So if the Son sets you free, you are truly free. Yes, I realize you are descendants of Abraham. And yet some of you are trying to kill me because there's no room in your hearts for my message. I'm telling you what I saw when I was with my father. But you are following the advice of your father, Jesus said to these leaders. Our father is Abraham, they declared. No, Jesus replied, for if you were really the children of Abraham, you would follow his example. Instead, you are trying to kill me because I told you the truth, which I heard from God. Abraham never did such a thing. No, you are imitating your real father. That passage reinforces what's happening in the temple here today with this poor woman. It reinforces everything we've heard so far today. Jesus told these men, you're no sons of Abraham. But then he calls this woman, who the leaders looked disdainfully on, the daughter of Abraham. He's declaring war on the leaders of the church. Jesus heals again on the Sabbath, which drives them nuts. And then he starts the whole conversation, which was the original story we talked of, by calling them hypocrites. Jesus healed the woman once and forever, which is what he said to her, past tense to present tense, which we just talked about. There's no need to worry that this disease can manifest itself again. She is free indeed. The men that Jesus just got done talking to are certainly bound in sin, and they will die in their sin unless they repent. Jesus tells that to all of us. If we follow him, we have his truth, and the truth will set us free. May the Lord bless you and keep you and make his face to shine on you and give you his blessed shalom. Bye.